Hello, BookTube. I've got a little mail for you today, a very fugitive, on-the-run video here at Hyde Cottage. Chaos is the order of the day. Not just on the little laptop, not just in the digital world of Steve's work, but also everywhere else, all of a sudden. So, once again, I apologize. You are not being bombarded with videos. I apologize. Our normal bombardment is going to have to wait at least another day. I'm really in the mood for a nice, long, indulgent Steve stream. I know that none of the rest of you are, but I really am in the mood for such a thing, to reconnect. I barely recognize you. Have you been to the gym? You look good. Anyway, we've got just a handful of packages that we can look at here, but this is going to be the only video today. Sorry about that. So we've got one package that's wafer thin, and that usually means a slim volume of poetry. Once upon a time, there were alternatives. We've been opening mail on this channel for so long, almost a decade, that some of you will remember when there were alternatives. When the other thing that might come in the mail that would be really small would be a publisher's catalog. Their seasonal catalog of what's coming up, in the autumn or whatnot. But that's all digital now, and I'm cheering. That's nothing wrong with that. I'm cheering that. Yeah, it is a slim volume of poetry. This is by Ollie Hazard, and it's called Sleepers Awake. And this comes out in February, so that's one of my most distant books, and I will put it in a pile, and it will go to my poetry guy. As simple as that. I now, for a little while anyway, until he finds greener pastures, I have a poetry guy. So, I should mention what I'm talking about. To any of you who are new, I am the editor of an online literary journal named Open Letters Review. I'm also the editor of a book section in a print newspaper, so I've got two book editor jobs. And for the newspaper, I'm not in need of a poetry guy. But for Open Letters Review, we will review anything that breathes that's new. I'll do it myself, but I'd much prefer to find people who will take real joy in doing it. And I've recently stumbled on a poetry guy. I will stick with him. And he will get this eventually. I'm not going to mail just this one thing, but let's see here. But we've already, I'll read you the pub sheet for this thing, but we've already discussed many times on this channel that what is a publicist supposed to do when writing even a brief paragraph about a work of contemporary poetry? What are they supposed to do? None of it makes any sense. None of it adheres to anything like formal structure or theme. It's going to be tough to summarize. So let's see what kind of a job they do. I wouldn't be surprised if they just tell the writers, the poets, to do it. Send us in a paragraph. There's no way. We can do that with, the Battle of Guam, but we can't do it with a volume of poetry. This book, which takes its title from the Lutheran hymn reworked by Bach in his cantata of the same name, delights in wordplay, finding semantic sense diagonally across the associations that arise from the disruption in the rhythm, space, and scale brought on by fatherhood, the pandemic, work, and all the other disruptions and continuations that make up the intransigent variability. The intransigent variability of life. Finding semantic sense diagonally across the associations that arise from the disruptions in the rhythm, space, and scale brought on by fatherhood, the pandemic, work, and all other disruptions and continuations that make up the intransigent variability of life. In a long poem and the shorter lyrics that follow, Sleepers Awake stages these collisions in language that playfully display the influence of W.S. Graham, Hopkins, the New York School poets, Tennyson, and others. Okay. All right. The long poem is also in part an ekphrastic poem, and the works of Nicole Eisenman is here an important influence. It is a book filled with joy as well as sadness, the possibility of forgetting, and it is that rare work that appears as a genuine enlargement of what poetry is capable. Okay. All right. Well, this book is none of those things. And we mainly know that because almost none of that made any sense as written English. But it doesn't matter because I don't need to figure it out. My poetry guy needs to figure it out. So I'll just put it on a pile. There's no hurry for it because it's February. So let's look at this next one. Seems to be a paperback. What have we got here? Okay. What is this? We've got some paperwork here. Lots of blurbs. Do I know this author? Let's take a look and see. Oh, this one's out in March. So this is even further along the line. Good Lord. This one's out in March of next year. This is by Natasha Pulley, and it is called The Hymn to Dionysus. This is the author's timely and timeless reimagining of the story of Dionysus, Greek god of ecstasy and madness, revelry and ruin. So it joins the endless library of Greek myth retelling, and they are all intensely predictable. So we know these aren't Greek myths retellings. These are Greek myths reclaiming from horrible cis white het people. Every one of them is. There are no exceptions. There's no originality involved in the approach. I don't know what this person is like as a writer. But this book is going to be Dionysus is gay. Or at the very least is a quote-unquote queer, not gay, but queer ally. All the women will be brave and strong and abused. All of the men, other than maybe Dionysus, will be horrible. They're so of a piece that I've largely ignored them, even though once upon a time, if you told me, if you go back to 1989 and tell me that there's going to come a time in your reading life when a lot of fiction is going to be myth retellings, meditations on myth, I would have been overjoyed. Just overjoyed. I've written books like that. I would have been overjoyed. I would have thought, what great material there is, even just if you stick to Greek mythology, what great material there is for such retellings. I had no idea. No idea at all. And I was clinging, always just doggedly optimistically, I was clinging to the idea that it wasn't that bad. Surely it's not that bad. Until I read one of these things that was about Medusa, the Gorgon, who turns people to stone, and who is, believe it or not, in the book, a victim of the patriarchy. But let's see. We haven't even got to the description yet. Let's see. And keep in mind, this isn't the book. This is just the pub sheet. The book could be really good. Raised in a Greek legion, Phaedros has been taught to fight for the homeland he's never seen and to follow his commander's orders at all costs. But when he rescues a baby from a fire at Thebes' palace, his commander's orders cease to make sense. Phaedros is forced to abandon the blue-eyed boy at a temple and to keep the baby's existence a secret. Years later, after a strange encounter that led to the death of his battalion, Phaedros has become a training master for young soldiers. He struggles with panic attacks and flashbacks, and he is not the only one. All around him, his fellow veterans are losing their minds. Phaedros' risk of madness is not his only problem. His life has become entangled with Thebes' young crown prince, who wishes to escape the marriage his mother, the queen, has chosen for him. When the prince vanishes, Phaedros is drawn into the search for him, a search that leads him to a blue-eyed witch named Dionysus, whose guidance is as wise as the events that surround him are strange. In his company, Phaedros witnesses sudden outbursts of riots and unrest, and everywhere Dionysus goes, rumors follow about a new god, one sired by Zeus but lost in a fire. The author transports us to an ancient empire on the edge of ruin to tell an utterly captivating story about a man needing a god to remind him how to be human. Well, okay. Okay. I am the first to opinionize during these mail hauls. I'm also the first to swallow my opinions. That sounds really good. That sounds like a really good approach. That sounds really good. Shall we read a bit of the first page? Just to see. This goes out in March, so we won't be revisiting this for a long time. Let's read just a bit of how it opens, just to see. Well, excuse me. It opens with a quote from the Iliad in Greek. Goodness gracious. Our bards always ask the muse to find the beginning. But the big joke, I say the joke in the loosest possible sense, is that they never then start at the bloody beginning. Find the beginning, muse, and then they say, well, here we are, 7 years into the middle of a big adventure I haven't told you about. There was this witch, right, and this man, and then they sparkle at you like it's clever. It's not clever, it's irritating. I'm going to start at the beginning because I'm a knight and I was taught to report things properly in a straight line without faffing around and looking smug that I've remembered the bits I artfully left out to reveal unto you later for narrative effect. I'm not going to sing it to you in poetry either. Poetry is for things that are made up. I'm just going to tell it. But I do promise this, one way or another, I will do what the bards always ask the muse for after they've done their stupid opening about beginnings. I'll tell you about rage and a complicated man. Okay, well, we see some of the narrative choices that the author is doing. That's full of contemporary language, full of contemporary cadence. It'll be for the narrator, I would imagine, to explain what that reference to being a knight is. It could be interesting. That could show some historical knowledge. Certainly nowhere in here is there displayed any literary knowledge, since the first line of the Iliad is indeed, "Sing to me, muse, tell me the tale of the rage of Achilles, that crowded good men into the underworld. There are corpses left above ground, food for dogs and kites." That is the opening invocation to the muse in the Iliad, and nowhere does it say, or even hint, that the writer of the singer of the Iliad is starting at the beginning of the story. It doesn't even begin. It doesn't even try to do that. So it's not a failed promise. I'm trying to think of the rage of Achilles is the origin of the quarrel between Achilles and Agamemnon, but it's not the start of the story, and the invocation to the muse is not suggesting that it is. That was just the brief teaser opening. Let's start at chapter 1. Just a bit. Just indulge me here. My name is Phaedrus. I was born into the Furies, which is the frontline legion of the Theban army. My commander was a joyful trickster called Helios, and his commander was Artemis, the famous lady who won the archery contest every year for 10 years at the Oracle Games. I know people from other places say who their parents and grandparents were, but that isn't how Theban legions work. I don't know who my parents were, and I didn't even think to wonder about it until I was older. Another element that's in virtually all of these books, the gay activist. It's not actually it's an alt-left queer ally LGBTQIAA plus two-spirit idea of the quote-unquote found family. It's on the surface, it's described by many of its participants as, well, you're rejected by your own family because of in irredeemable qualities in you that you can't have anything to do with, that you're born that way. But your family rejects you and they cast you out into the world and they disinherit you. But you find people who love you. So it's a found family. That's the way it's characterized by the alt-left. If you dig even a little, if you look at it even a little bit, it is clearly recognizable as a very, very old cult indoctrination method. One very old cult indoctrination is a disgraced former YouTube commentator referred to it as defu. Cut them off from the family. It's what Dianetics does. It's what the Mormons do. Cut them off from the family. But anyways, that is what this narrator is referring to. Found family. Helios told me different things depending on how he was feeling. Maybe I was the son of a princess. Maybe he'd found me on the rubbish heap behind a sacked city. Maybe he'd been friends with my mother, another knight who had me with the weird slave nobody liked because he insisted on making his own cheese. He was making a point, not just being annoying. It doesn't matter where a Theban knight is born or how. Okay, I don't know if I've ever read this author. The name sounds awful familiar to me. What else has this author written? I wonder. The Watchmaker of Filigree Street, The Bedlam Stacks, The Lost Future of Pepperharrow, The Kingdoms, The Half-Life of Valerie Kay. That sounds familiar, The Half-Life of Valerie Kay. I may have reviewed that. Well, anyway, sorry to dwell on this thing. This doesn't come out in March, so I don't have to think about it. And the author is right. If you're going to write historical fiction, much less legendary historical fiction, you're allowed to take all kinds of liberties with what you want to do, with what your narrator wants to sound like. Those are all legitimate decisions that you can make. The fact that the book seems like it could be, certainly has the potential to be enormously predictable. The villains of, what is this called? The Hymn to Dionysus. The villains in this book, there is, I think, virtually no chance that the villains in this book will be anything other than straight, older, cishet white men. I don't think there's any chance of that. The characters will all be from what we would now consider to be disadvantaged groups. You're absolutely guaranteed not only acceptance but a free ride in every Ivy League school in the country. I'm not sure how that qualifies as a disadvantage, but the ragtag found family coterie of heroes in the book will all be that. They will be heroes in spite of their weaknesses. Their weaknesses will be celebrated. Their bonds will be celebrated. I could be wrong. Certain aspects of the description of this book make it sound promising. So I will say I'll give it a try down the line, but I won't. I'm not going to give it a try this year. We'll see what next year brings. But then we have this last package. That one wasn't, I'm sure, meant to be quite so contentious. So it'll probably be, completely. It'll probably be completely normal. Obviously, it's horrible to be stolen from your city knowing your parents are dead if they're lucky or slaves elsewhere. Obviously, it's horrible to be taken to some barbarian country where people speak a different language and suddenly you're supposed to spend your life doing housework for some army pig and feeling grateful you're not out in the fields. Obviously, I didn't expect the triplets to be cheerful. That would have been stupid. But here's what happened whenever I went home. The triplets had always made bread, very good bread, and set the table, everything laid out beautifully, just for me. And then they stood there in a silent row and watched me eat. I had tried to stop them doing it. I tried telling them to eat with me or go away. I tried asking them why they were watching me. Nothing. They just stood and watched. If I tried to take my plate somewhere else, they followed. And so I had to eat in a minutely scrutinized, paralyzing, awkward silence. Then I retreated to my room to get washed and changed, with the door very firmly shut, but one of them always stood right outside. I could see his shadow in the light from under the door. They did it in shifts, about an hour each, always. Again, I tried to say they didn't need to do that, and frankly it was unsettling, and could they, sawed off and play a game or something, but no. Okay, so I think the author here is clearly going to give Phaedros a completely modern voice. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Right, that's, as you said many, many times on this channel, that's one of the decisions you have to make when you write historical fiction. What are your characters going to sound like? So let's just move on to this next thing, which is huge. Oh, goodness gracious, what is this? What is this? Okay, let's take a look at this thing. This is a paperback. I wonder if did we get this originally in a hardcover? This is a paperback release. And it comes out, it's out already. It came out a couple of weeks ago. This is by Christopher Booker. This is the 20th anniversary edition of the 7 Basic Plots, Why We Tell Stories. Huge thing. Beautiful thing. 20th anniversary edition. So I wonder if Bloomsbury is reprinting this for the anniversary, but that you'd have to go 20 years ago to find a hardcover. Fascinating. Just fascinating. And like I mentioned, I think it was yesterday in yesterday's video. It's so weird to talk about yesterday in the video in terms of one single video. Nevertheless, there's going to have to be the lie of the land until my life goes back to normal. And it's still a video a day, I might point out. Showing you stuff that you're not going to see on any other channel, so I'm trying to sell myself because I feel terrible leaving you all like this. But like I mentioned, I think it was yesterday, I no longer feel that awkward little lurch about getting a paperback in the mail, whether it's an anniversary reprint or a paperback edition of something that came out last year, because I have revived my literary blog, Steve Reads, over on Substack. And that scratches an itch like crazy. Oh my God. That is the perfect place for all the catch-all literary stuff that I want to write about, and a paperback release that I'm going to read, well, that might not have so legitimate a place in Open Letters Review, for instance, which is mostly new releases. It has no place whatsoever in Big Canoe News in Northern Georgia, the newspaper where I'm an editor. No place at all there. I'm scrabbling for space in Big Canoe News, so I'm not going to use it for a paperback reprint. All the same old book section editor calculations that I've talked about on this channel. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't talk about those calculations, but a number of you have written to me and said you find them fascinating. But when you've got a Substack, a blog of your own, basically that's what Substack is. It's a blog. I've got my Steve Reads blog back. I can write about anything I want. Today's, if I can get around to posting it, is a barn burner. But anyway, so this is going to be a $30 paperback, and it's not going to be. It's out already. Using a wealth of examples from ancient myths and folk tales via the plays and novels of great literature to the popular movies and soap operas of today, this book shows that there are 7 archetypal themes which recur throughout every kind of storytelling. But this is only the prelude to an investigation into how and why we are programmed to imagine stories in these ways, and how they relate to the inmost patterns of human psychology. I can't for the life of me remember if I read this 20 years ago. I would assume not. I would assume that it would have struck me as way too prescriptive. I would have thought, what is this? 1,000 pages? 700 pages? I would have thought, watching this author get prescriptive for 700 pages is going to be very boring and very wrong. For every example that he comes up with of his 7 basic plots, I'm going to be able to come up with 20 that defy his descriptions and that he isn't mentioning simply because he doesn't know about them. So I can imagine myself ignoring this 20 years ago. Drawing on a vast array of examples, from Proust to detective stories, from the Marquis de Sade to E.T., the author then leads us through the extraordinary changes in the nature of storytelling over the past 200 years, and why so many stories have lost the plot by losing touch with their underlying archetypal purpose. The author analyzes why evolution has given us the need to tell stories and illustrates how the storytelling has provided a uniquely revealing mirror into mankind's psychological development over the past 5,000 years. Good Lord, settle down, Seymour. Okay, well, great. I honestly don't remember if I've read this before, but I have it now, and I will definitely read it now. And the date on this is September 10th. So this will be out and available. Oh goodness gracious, this is. Well, let's take a look. Maybe the table of contents will give us a wee little hint. This one has an inscription not from Homer, but from Robert Frost. We dance around in a ring and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows. What did that mean, Bobby? Don't rightly know. So part 1, the 7 gateways to the underworld. Rags to riches, the quest, voyage and return, comedy, tragedy, rebirth, the monster. And part 2 is the complete happy ending. Part 3 is missing the mark, with a whole section on Thomas Hardy. Good. Good. And part 4 is why we tell stories, which I imagine will be the COD Evo Devo. Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, like I said, I love my job. I never know what I'm going to get. So we have the 7 basic plots. But we also have the hymn to Dionysus. I wonder which of the 7 basic plots it will be. Or is it part of the breakdown of telling stories? And then Sleepers Awake, a slim volume of poetry. And that is not all the mail that's coming today, but that's all the mail that I have time for, I'm afraid. So I have to wrap this video up, and it will be the only one today. I am devolving into a normal booktuber, which is really bad. I will try to make up for it tomorrow or the next day, and I hope to see you then. Thank you, BookTube.